The Letter to the Bank. A story of dignity and redemption. Chapter 1. The Words That Break. The autumn rain hammered against the kitchen window of the small house in Philadelphia. Margaret Chen, 68 years old, stood motionless in front of the sink, her trembling hands clutching a coffee mug that had long gone cold. The words still echoed in her mind, sharp as broken glass. "You're becoming useless, Mom." Her daughter Jessica had said it just 3 hours ago, during what was supposed to be a simple Sunday lunch. Margaret had dropped a serving dish. Her hands weren't as steady as they used to be, and the ceramic had shattered across the hardwood floor. If you're enjoying this story, please subscribe to the channel. We bring you real, emotional stories that touch the heart. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. "I'm sorry, sweetheart," Margaret had whispered, already kneeling to pick up the pieces. "For God's sake, Mom, this is the third thing you've broken this month." Jessica's voice had been razor-sharp, cutting through the quiet afternoon. "You can barely walk without your cane. You forget things constantly, and now you're destroying everything in the house. You're becoming useless." Margaret's son-in-law, Tom, had shifted uncomfortably in his chair, staring at his plate. Jessica continued, her frustration spilling over like a dam breaking. "I can't keep doing this. I have my own life, my own kids to raise. Maybe it's time we talked about other options. A facility, somewhere with people trained to handle me." Margaret's voice had been barely a whisper. "You know what I mean." Now, alone in her kitchen, Margaret felt something she hadn't felt in decades, utterly, completely alone. Her husband Robert had died 6 years ago, and Jessica was her only child. The house felt enormous around her, every corner filled with memories that now seemed to mock her current state. She walked slowly to her small desk in the corner of the living room, each step measured and careful. The oak desk had been Robert's, where he'd paid bills and written letters for 43 years. Margaret sat down heavily, feeling every one of her 68 years pressing down on her shoulders. On the desk sat a stack of unopened mail, bills mostly, and there near the bottom a letter from Cornerstone Bank, a notice about her mortgage. Margaret picked it up with shaking fingers. Before we continue, drop a comment below telling us what city you're watching from. We love connecting with viewers from all over the world. The letter was dated 2 weeks ago. She'd forgotten about it. Another thing she'd forgotten. The words swam before her eyes. Final notice, overdue payment. Foreclosure proceedings may begin. Margaret's breath caught in her throat. The house, their house, hers and Robert's, was in danger. She'd been so focused on doctor appointments and physical therapy after her fall last spring that she'd let things slip. The bank account was low. Her retirement checks barely covered expenses, and now this. "Useless," she whispered to herself. But then something shifted inside her. A small flame of defiance, buried deep beneath layers of pain and self-doubt, began to flicker. Margaret pulled out a sheet of writing paper, real paper, the kind Robert had always used for important correspondence, and uncapped her fountain pen. Her hand steadied as she began to write. "To whom it may concern at Cornerstone Bank." The words flowed slowly at first, then with increasing clarity. Margaret wrote about her husband, about the 43 years they'd spent in this house. She wrote about raising Jessica here, about birthday parties in the backyard and Christmas mornings by the fireplace. She wrote about Robert's death and the struggle to keep going. She wrote about her fall, her physical therapy, her determination to stay independent. And then she wrote about dignity. "I may be old, my hands may shake and my steps may be slow, but I am not useless. I am not a burden to be warehoused and forgotten. I built a life in this house. I raised a family. I was a teacher for 36 years, shaping young minds and making a difference. I may need help, but I am still here, still fighting, still worthy of respect. If you're feeling the emotion of this story, please hit that like button. It really helps us continue bringing you meaningful content. Margaret continued writing, her pen moving with purpose across the page. She explained her financial situation with brutal honesty, the medical bills, the fixed income, the overwhelming expenses. But she also proposed a solution, a payment plan, a restructuring of her mortgage, anything that would allow her to keep her home and her dignity intact. When she finished, Margaret's hand ached, but her heart felt lighter than it had in months. She read the letter 3 times, making small corrections, ensuring every word reflected exactly what she meant to say. The rain had stopped. Through the window, she could see the neighbors' children playing in puddles, their laughter carrying on the evening air. Margaret folded the letter carefully, placed it in an envelope, and addressed it with precise, measured handwriting. Tomorrow morning, she would mail it, and tomorrow morning, she would begin to figure out what came next. That night, Margaret lay in bed, unable to sleep. The conversation with Jessica played on repeat in her mind, each word a fresh wound. But beneath the pain, something else was growing, a determination she'd thought she'd lost. At 2:47 a.m., Margaret made a decision. She would write another letter. Not to the bank this time, but to Jessica. She would explain everything, not with anger or guilt, but with honesty. She would tell her daughter how those words had cut, how deeply they had wounded. But more importantly, she would tell Jessica about her plans to move forward, to prove that age and difficulty didn't equal uselessness. As dawn broke over Philadelphia, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Margaret Chen rose from her bed with purpose. Her hands still shook slightly as she made her coffee, but her resolve was steady. The letter to the bank sat on the hall table, stamped and ready to mail. And Margaret was ready to fight. Chapter 2. The Response. 3 weeks passed with agonizing slowness. Margaret had mailed the letter to Cornerstone Bank the morning after writing it, walking the 4 blocks to the post office despite the cold October wind. Each step had been an act of defiance against the word useless that still occasionally whispered in her mind. Remember to subscribe if you haven't yet. We're building a community of people who believe in real stories with real heart. Join us. She'd also written to Jessica, though that letter had been harder to send. In it, she'd been honest about her hurt, but also about her love. She'd explained that she didn't need to be coddled or warehoused. She needed to be respected, to be seen as a person still capable of making her own decisions. She'd told Jessica about the financial troubles and the letter to the bank, laying everything bare. Jessica had called 3 days later. The conversation had been awkward, stilted. Jessica had apologized, her voice tight with emotion and something that might have been shame. But there was distance there too, a gulf that wouldn't be bridged in a single phone call. "I didn't mean it like that, Mom. I was just stressed. The kids have been sick and work has been crazy and—" "I know, sweetheart," Margaret had said quietly. "But words have weight. They linger." The call had ended with promises to talk more later, to visit soon. Margaret didn't know if those promises would be kept. Now, on a grey November morning, Margaret sat in her kitchen, sorting through mail when she saw it. A letter from Cornerstone Bank. Her heart hammered in her chest as she carefully opened the envelope with a butter knife. The letter was not what she expected. Dear Mrs. Chen, thank you for your letter dated October 18th. Your words touched many people here at Cornerstone Bank. We forwarded your letter to our regional manager, Patricia Holloway, who would like to meet with you personally to discuss your situation. Please call the number below at your earliest convenience to schedule an appointment. Sincerely, David Martinez, Customer Relations Department. Margaret read the letter 3 times, hardly believing it. They wanted to meet with her. They hadn't simply denied her request or proceeded with foreclosure. Someone had actually listened. What do you think will happen next? Drop your predictions in the comments, and don't forget to like this video if you're invested in Margaret's journey. She called the number that afternoon, her voice steady despite her nervousness. The receptionist was warm and professional, scheduling an appointment for the following Tuesday at 2 p.m. Margaret marked it on her calendar with a sense of cautious hope. The days until Tuesday crawled by. Margaret spent them preparing, gathering financial documents, organizing her thoughts, rehearsing what she would say. She also spent time doing something she'd neglected, taking care of herself. She went to the salon for the first time in 6 months, getting her silver hair trimmed and styled. She pressed her best navy dress and polished her shoes. On Tuesday morning, Margaret woke early. She'd barely slept, her mind racing with possibilities and fears. What if this meeting was just a formality before they took her house? What if they saw her as Jessica had, as a useless old woman who couldn't manage her own affairs? She pushed the thoughts away and focused on getting ready. Looking in the mirror, Margaret saw someone she'd almost forgotten, a woman with dignity, with presence. The woman who had commanded classrooms of rowdy teenagers for 36 years. The woman who had weathered loss and pain and kept going. The bus ride to the bank took 40 minutes. Margaret watched the city pass by, the familiar neighborhoods of Philadelphia, the changing faces of the streets she'd known for decades. She'd taught in this city, raised her family here, built a life. This was her home, and she was fighting to keep it. Take a moment to hit that subscribe button if you're rooting for Margaret. Your support means everything. Cornerstone Bank's downtown office was an imposing building of glass and steel. Margaret felt small as she entered the marble lobby, but she kept her back straight and her chin up. She gave her name to the receptionist, who smiled warmly and directed her to the 11th floor. Patricia Holloway's office was elegant but not ostentatious. The woman who rose to greet Margaret was perhaps 50, with kind eyes and a firm handshake. "Mrs. Chen, thank you so much for coming. Please sit down." Margaret settled into a comfortable chair across from Patricia's desk. The office had a view of the city, buildings stretching toward a cloudy sky. "I'll be direct with you, Mrs. Chen," Patricia began, settling back into her own chair. "Your letter was extraordinary. It made its way across several desks before it reached mine, and I can tell you that everyone who read it was moved by it." Margaret felt heat rise in her cheeks. I needed someone to understand. And we do understand. I read about your husband, your years in this home, your career as a teacher. I also read about your daughter's words." Patricia's expression softened. "That must have been incredibly painful." Tears pricked at Margaret's eyes, but she blinked them back. "It was. It still is." Patricia nodded. "Mrs. Chen, I want to be honest with you about something. Banks aren't generally in the business of sentiment. We deal in numbers, in contracts, in assets, but we're also made up of people, and your letter reminded many of us why we got into this work in the first place. To help people build lives, to be part of communities, to make a difference." She pulled out a file folder and opened it. "I've reviewed your account history. You and your husband were excellent customers for over 40 years. You've never missed a payment until this year, after your medical emergency. That tells me everything I need to know about your character and your commitment." Comment below. Do you think Patricia will help Margaret? Let us know your thoughts. "What I'm proposing," Patricia continued, "is a restructured payment plan. We'll lower your monthly mortgage payment to something manageable on your current income. We'll also defer some of the payments you've missed to the end of your loan term, so you won't be penalized for falling behind during a medical crisis." Margaret felt her breath catch. You would do that? More than that. I'd like to connect you with our senior services liaison. We have programs that can help with financial planning, budgeting assistance, and resources for homeowners your age. There are also property tax relief programs in Pennsylvania that you may qualify for. We want to help you stay in your home, Mrs. Chen, if you want to stay. The tears came then, silent and unstoppable. Margaret pressed a hand to her mouth, overwhelmed. Patricia quietly passed her a box of tissues and waited. "I'm sorry," Margaret whispered. I didn't expect." "Kindness?" Patricia asked gently. "Mrs. Chen, you spent 36 years teaching children. You gave to your community for decades. Now it's the community's turn to give back, and for what it's worth, you are not useless. You never were." They spent the next hour going over details, signing papers, setting up the new payment structure. Patricia's assistant brought in tea, and Margaret felt the knot of anxiety that had lived in her chest for months finally begin to loosen. As Margaret stood to leave, Patricia walked her to the door. "Mrs. Chen, may I ask you something personal?" "Of course. Have you spoken with your daughter since you wrote to her?" Margaret nodded. "Once. It was difficult. There's a lot of hurt between us right now." Patricia was quiet for a moment. "I have a mother about your age. We haven't always had an easy relationship. Sometimes we say things we don't mean, especially when we're scared. Your daughter was probably frightened, watching you struggle, feeling helpless. That doesn't excuse her words, but it might explain them." "Perhaps," Margaret said softly. "Give her time, and give yourself credit for standing up for your dignity. That takes real courage." If this story is resonating with you, please like and share. Let's spread stories that matter. Margaret left the bank feeling lighter than she had in months. The November air was cold but crisp, invigorating. She stood on the sidewalk for a moment, watching people rush past, everyone caught up in their own private dramas and triumphs. She thought about calling Jessica to share the news, but decided against it. Not yet. Some victories needed to be savored privately first. Instead, Margaret walked to a small cafe 3 blocks away, a place she and Robert used to visit on Saturday mornings. She ordered a coffee and a pastry, something she rarely allowed herself anymore, and sat by the window watching the city move around her. For the first time in a long time, Margaret Chen felt like herself again. Not useless, not a burden, just herself, a woman who had fought for her dignity and won. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would still be bills to pay, challenges to face, difficult conversations with Jessica. But right now, in this moment, Margaret allowed herself to feel something she'd almost forgotten: hope. As she finished her coffee and prepared to head home, Margaret noticed a young woman at the next table, struggling with a screaming toddler, looking exhausted and overwhelmed. Their eyes met, and Margaret smiled. "Those days are hard," Margaret said gently, "but they pass so quickly. Treasure them, even the difficult moments." The young mother's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you. I needed to hear that." Margaret patted her hand as she stood to leave. "You're doing better than you think. We all are." Outside, the sun had broken through the clouds, casting golden light across the Philadelphia streets. Margaret Chen walked toward the bus stop with steady steps, her head held high, ready to face whatever came next. Chapter 3. Coming Home. December arrived in Philadelphia with a surprising gentleness. Instead of the bitter cold that usually marked the month, temperatures hovered just above freezing, and light snow fell in soft, intermittent flurries. Margaret watched it from her kitchen window as she prepared dinner, just for herself, though she'd made enough for 2 out of habit. We're in the final chapter. If you've been with us this whole journey, please subscribe. We upload new stories every week. 6 weeks had passed since her meeting with Patricia Holloway at Cornerstone Bank. 6 weeks since she'd restructured her mortgage and connected with the senior services liaison, a kind woman named Rosa, who had helped Margaret navigate property tax relief programs and local assistance resources. The weight of potential homelessness had lifted, replaced by something Margaret was still getting used to: stability. But the ache of Jessica's words remained. They'd spoken twice since that first awkward phone call, brief surface-level conversations about weather and grandchildren. The distance between them felt vast as an ocean. Margaret had just sat down with her dinner when the doorbell rang. She wasn't expecting anyone. For a moment, anxiety fluttered in her chest, the old worry that something was wrong, that someone was bringing bad news. Using her cane, she made her way to the front door and peered through the peephole. Her breath caught. Jessica stood on the porch, holding a casserole dish, snowflakes catching in her dark hair. Margaret opened the door slowly. "Jessica." "Hi, Mom." Jessica's voice was small, uncertain. I brought dinner. I know it's unexpected, but I thought, can I come in?" Margaret stepped aside without a word. Jessica entered, and the familiar scent of her daughter's perfume, something floral and light, filled the hallway. It reminded Margaret of 1,000 other visits in happier times. "Drop a comment telling us what you think will happen. Will they reconcile? Let us know your thoughts." In the kitchen, Jessica set the casserole on the counter. "It's chicken and rice, the way you taught me to make it. I don't know if you've eaten yet, but—" "I just sat down," Margaret said quietly. "There's plenty. Would you like to join me?" Jessica nodded, and for a few minutes they moved around each other in the kitchen, with the careful choreography of people who have shared this space before, but now feel like strangers. Margaret set out plates. Jessica found the silverware without asking where it was kept. They worked in silence. At the table, they sat across from each other. Jessica served the casserole, her hands shaking slightly. Margaret noticed, but said nothing. "Mum, I need to apologize." Jessica's words came out in a rush. "Really apologize, not just a quick 'I'm sorry' on the phone. What I said to you that day was cruel and unforgivable. You're not useless. You've never been useless. You're my mother, and you're one of the strongest people I've ever known, and I—" Her voice broke. Jessica pressed her hands to her face, shoulders shaking with sobs she'd clearly been holding back. Margaret felt her own tears coming. She reached across the table, her hand finding Jessica's. "Sweetheart." "I was so scared, Mom." Jessica looked up, her face wet with tears. "Watching you struggle after your fall, seeing you in pain, worrying about you being alone in this house, I was terrified. And instead of telling you that, instead of asking how I could help, I lashed out. I said something horrible and unforgivable." If you're feeling the emotion of this moment, please hit that like button. This is what real storytelling is all about. Margaret squeezed her daughter's hand. "It was cruel. It did hurt me very deeply. But Jessica, I need you to understand something. I was scared too. Scared of becoming a burden. Scared of losing my independence. Scared of being forgotten, put away somewhere and forgotten." "I would never, wouldn't you?" Margaret asked gently. "You mentioned facilities, other options. I understand why, truly, but sweetheart, I'm not ready for that. I may need help, but I'm not helpless. There's a difference." Jessica nodded, wiping her eyes. "Tom and I talked after you sent your letter. I mean, really talked. He said I sounded like I was trying to solve a problem instead of supporting my mother. He was right. I was treating you like a burden to be managed instead of a person to be loved." They sat in silence for a moment, hands still clasped across the table. "I went to the bank," Margaret said finally. "I wrote them a letter, and they helped me. I restructured my mortgage. I'm going to be okay, Jessica. Financially, I'm going to be okay." Jessica's eyes widened. "You did that? By yourself?" I did. I fought for myself. I had to. A strange expression crossed Jessica's face. Pride mixed with shame. Admiration mixed with regret. I should have been there to help you. Instead, I pushed you away. You were dealing with your own stress, your own fears. I understand that, but Jessica, we need to talk honestly about what comes next. I won't lie, there will be times I need help. My hands shake, I forget things occasionally, I move slower than I used to. Those are just facts of aging. Tell us in the comments, what city are you watching from? We love hearing from our global audience. I want to help, Mom, really help. Not by putting you somewhere or making decisions for you, but by being there, by listening, by treating you with the respect you deserve. Margaret smiled through her tears. That's all I've ever wanted. They ate dinner together, and slowly the conversation shifted from heavy apologies to lighter topics. Jessica talked about the kids, Margaret's grandchildren, Michael and Sophia. Michael had made the basketball team. Sophia was learning piano and driving everyone crazy with her practice. She asks about you constantly, Jessica said. She wants to come visit. She misses her grandma. I miss her too. Both of them. What if... Jessica hesitated. What if we came for Christmas, spent the day here like we used to? I know it's not far away, but I want to start making things right. Really right. Margaret felt warmth spread through her chest. I would love that. As the evening wore on, they moved to the living room. Jessica helped Margaret build a fire in the fireplace, and they sat together on the old sofa, watching the flames dance. Outside, the snow had picked up, covering the neighborhood in white. Mom, can I ask you something? Jessica said quietly. Of course. That letter you wrote to the bank, what made you do it? Where did you find the strength? Margaret thought for a moment. Your words, actually. When you called me useless, something broke inside me. But then something else happened. I got angry. Not bitter angry, but determined angry. I realized that I still had fight left in me, that I wasn't ready to give up on myself even if others had. Or if Margaret's courage inspires you, please subscribe to our channel. We need your support to keep bringing these stories to you. I'm so sorry I made you feel that way. I know you are. And I forgive you, Jessica. But I also need you to know that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. Those words changed something between us. It will take time to rebuild that trust. Jessica nodded. I understand. I'm willing to do the work, Mom, whatever it takes. They talked late into the evening, saying things that had needed to be said for months, maybe years. Jessica admitted that watching her father die had terrified her, made her hyper-aware of Margaret's mortality. She'd been trying to protect herself from future pain by creating emotional distance. Margaret admitted that she'd been stubborn about accepting help, so determined to maintain her independence that she'd isolated herself. She'd stopped calling friends, stopped engaging with her community, retreated into her grief and fear. We both have work to do, Margaret said finally. You need to trust that I can make my own decisions, even if they're not the ones you'd make. And I need to accept that asking for help isn't weakness, it's wisdom. Deal, Jessica said, smiling through fresh tears. Before Jessica left that night, she hugged her mother tightly. I love you, Mom. I'm so proud of you for fighting for yourself. I'm sorry it took me this long to say it. I love you too, sweetheart. Drive safely. The roads will be slick. Margaret stood in the doorway, watching Jessica's car disappear into the snowy night. The house felt warmer somehow, fuller. The terrible emptiness that had haunted it since that Sunday in October was beginning to ease. Please don't forget to like this video and share it with someone who needs to hear this story. Real stories change real lives. Christmas arrived with the kind of magic Margaret had forgotten could exist. Jessica came with Tom and the grandchildren early in the morning, arms full of presents and food. Michael had grown 3 inches since Margaret had seen him last, and Sophia launched herself at her grandmother with squeals of delight. They cooked together, all of them crowded in Margaret's small kitchen, a beautiful, chaotic mess of laughter and flour and too many people trying to help. Tom played Christmas music on his phone. Sophia insisted on making cookies shaped like reindeer. Michael set the table with exaggerated care, determined to do it perfectly. Margaret watched it all with a full heart. This was what mattered. This was what she'd been fighting for, not just the house, but the life within it. The memories being made, the love being shared. After dinner, they sat around the fireplace. Jessica handed Margaret a small, wrapped box. "This is from all of us." Inside was a simple silver bracelet engraved with words: strong, brave, loved. Margaret's eyes filled with tears for what felt like the 100th time that day. "It's perfect." "There's something else," Jessica said, pulling out an envelope. "Tom and I talked, and we want to help with the house expenses. Not take over, not make decisions for you, just help. A monthly contribution to make things easier. We should have offered this from the beginning, instead of talking about facilities." "Jessica, you don't have to." "I know we don't have to, we want to. Please, Mum. Let us help. Let us be part of the solution." Margaret looked at her daughter's earnest face, at Tom's encouraging nod, at her grandchildren watching with curious eyes. This was what family meant. Not perfection, but showing up, trying again, choosing love over fear. "Thank you," Margaret whispered. "Yes, thank you." If this ending touched your heart, please subscribe to our channel. We're building a community of people who believe in hope, family, and second chances. As the day faded into evening and her family prepared to leave, Margaret felt something she hadn't felt in a very long time: peace. Not the absence of problems or challenges, those would always exist, but the deep, abiding peace that comes from knowing you're not alone, from knowing you're valued, from knowing you matter. Jessica hugged her at the door. "Same time next week for dinner." "I'll be here," Margaret said with a smile. After they left, Margaret sat in her quiet house, the Christmas lights twinkling, the fire burning low. She looked at the bracelet on her wrist, running her fingers over the engraved words: strong, brave, loved. She thought about the letter she'd written to the bank, the courage it had taken to fight for herself. She thought about Patricia Holloway's kindness, about Rosa's patient assistance, about the community resources that had helped her find stability. She thought about Jessica's tears and apologies, about the bridges they were rebuilding. Margaret Chen was 68 years old. Her hands shook. Her steps were slow. She had challenges ahead: medical appointments, financial planning, the ongoing work of aging with grace. But she was not useless. She had never been useless. She was a woman who had taught for 36 years, shaping young minds, a woman who had loved and been loved, a woman who had fought for her dignity when it was threatened, a woman who had found the courage to demand respect and the wisdom to accept help. As Margaret prepared for bed that night, she paused at her desk, the place where she'd written the letter that changed everything. On impulse, she pulled out a fresh sheet of paper and began to write again. "Dear Self, you are stronger than you believed. You are braver than you knew. You are loved more than you realized. This year taught you that asking for help is not weakness, that standing up for yourself is not selfishness, and that your worth is not diminished by age or difficulty. You have more chapters to write, more days to live, more love to give and receive. Keep fighting, keep hoping, keep going. You are not useless. You never were. Love, Margaret." She folded the letter carefully and tucked it into her desk drawer, a reminder for the hard days that would inevitably come. Outside, fresh snow began to fall, covering Philadelphia in white. Inside, Margaret Chen climbed into bed, turned off the light, and fell asleep with a peaceful heart. Her house was still hers. Her daughter was finding her way back. Her life was still hers to live, and that was everything. Thank you for watching this story to the end. If it moved you, please subscribe to our channel for more emotional, real-life stories. Like this video to help others find it. Comment your city below. We love knowing where our viewers are from. Share your thoughts about Margaret's journey. What part touched you most? We upload new stories every week that celebrate courage, family, and the human spirit. Join our community and never miss a story. See you in the next one.